You know, many times we hear about science and religion as things that contradict each other, and especially evolution. Darwinist evolution as something which is a revolutionary phenomena which had basically turned over religious life, mainly Christian religious life, but in general the Judeo-Christian thought which has formed our societies. And I guess the first question that comes to the mind and comes to everyone's mind that is watching us, what's your take on religion versus science? Is it something that are those two things something that must contradict each other?
Well, first I must apologize for my thin internet connection. What an amazing event this is. In the first place, we're communicating to a worldwide community, and we're also communicating across traditions, you being a rabbi, the amazing tradition of Judaism and the Abrahamic religions, me being a scientist, us communicating worldwide, and I'm embarrassed about my thin internet connection, which I can do nothing about living in
It's not so bad now,
rural,
so I think you should be comfortable.
Yeah. Well, there's two major definitions of religion, Shlomo, as you know. One is based on belief in supernatural agents. The other, thanks to Emil Durkheim, is based on a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things which unite into one single moral community. And if we go by that definition, which makes no mention of supernatural beliefs, there's your strong connection between evolution and science and religion. Because when we want to think about unified communities, as we certainly must, increasingly at a global scale, unified communities, the role of beliefs and practices organized around the sacred, that is something that we can actually provide a scientific account for, which is very conciliant with religions of all sorts, the Abrahamic tradition plus any other tradition. So, so there's your strong connection.
I understand that from your point of view, religion can be useful, although it doesn't have any real truth to it. On the other hand, what is your take on something which we all experience, no matter if we are religious or not, or no matter what religion we follow or we do not follow, the idea that there is some inner seeking in every human to find some higher meaning, and there is some inner seeking to get uplifted from the materialistic existence. I would just quote here Kant, who said, "The starry heavens above me and the moral law within me, those are the two things that I can never explain." What is, according to, in other words, in the eyes of the evolutionary science that you follow or that you study and you teach, what is, in your view, the basis of this human seek for meaning, for higher meaning, ethical meaning?
Right, and we have such little time to talk about such grand issues. There is a watershed decision that needs to be made as to whether or not we're comfortable thinking about religion as 100% a human construction, a product of cultural evolution. And as a scientist, then I'm definitely on one side of that watershed, basically. Can we think about, and can we be comfortable thinking about all aspects of religion as a product of cultural evolution? And there's plenty of deep religious thinkers who are comfortable with that. In our previous conversation, I quoted the novelist Isaac Bashevis Singer, who wrote, "But now at least he understood his religion. Its essence was the relation between man and his fellows." So, and to say that religion has no truth, I think I would push back on that, because truth is a multifaceted concept. It's not just scientific truth. There's many other forms of truth, and I would say that religions, even when we view them as a human construction, have enormous amounts of truth to them. When we think of truth as, for example, something which leads to human thriving, which we want all of our meaning systems to be. So I had the honor of a conversation with the Dalai Lama about late last year. And here's what I said to him. I can say it in less than 1 minute. That when I entered the field of evolutionary biology in the 1970s, evolution was all about genes. Those genes were said to be selfish. And the idea of conscious evolution was totally taboo. Now, in the present, fast forwarding to the present, we can say that evolution is not just about genes. It's about any process that combines the three ingredients of variation, selection, and replication. That includes cultural evolution, personal evolution, computer evolutionary algorithms. Now, evolution is not just about selfishness. It can explain altruism in addition to selfishness. That's the quote that you just cited. And number three, the idea that evolution can be conscious, that we can steer evolution, is something which is not just admissible, but essential, and essential at the worldwide scale. And that involves becoming something larger than ourselves, which is a primary religious sentiment, is that we regard ourselves as something, part of something, and building towards something larger than ourselves. And so in all of these respects, I regard myself as a religious person. And I think that there's a justification for that, even while I avoid any reliance on supernatural agency. That's possible.
What I wanted to ask you about is what we experience today, that all of these groups that are in a multi-level evolution and competing one with the other are becoming more and more seemingly one group, because through telecommunication, you are in the US, I'm in Hungary, and we are able to communicate one with each other. And we are really becoming one large group. But becoming one large group because of the common vessels of communication, are we also becoming more cooperative with each other? What I'm trying to ask is communication, does communication equal cooperation? Does it mean, how do many groups merge into one group when there is no common, or seemingly no common moral values? Because if we compare to this large group to the groups of the past, it seems like our common values are less common than what it used to be. What's your take on that?
Again, so much to say and so little time.
And I'm stealing half of your time.
We borrowed shamelessly from Rabbi Hillel in crafting that little meme, which has been so successful. But having said that, everything else is commentary. It turns out that the commentary is very important. And if you simply have, like, are into a do unto others frame of mind, that's not nearly good enough. Scholars of religion say that every strong religion is strong in two dimensions. There's a vertical component, which is your relationship with the divine, which just galvanizes you psychologically. But then there's a horizontal component, which is the whole social organization of a religion. And if you look at what religions are on that horizontal dimension, they are just so finely designed to ensure cooperation. And so the non-cooperative individual, the transgressor, that's not allowed to persist in a strong church. And in a very organized way, cooperation is enforced. It's a moral community which has so much, an entire physiology, calling it an organism, and it's a venerable religious metaphor, is to say the body of the church. The church is like a single organism. That's something that needs to be taken very, very seriously. And so the challenge, which I think is one which is actually doable, is to, in the first place, extend that concept of the organism to the whole earth. The global organism, there's no alternative. There's no way back from a globalized world, and we shouldn't want to go back to that. But at the same time, that has to be integrated with our lower level identities, our religious identities, our political identities, all the way down to our personal identities. And the small group remains a vital unit as we work as cells towards this global superorganism. So it's not as if we lose our lower level identities, we subordinate them to something larger. And that can be true at the level of entire religious space. You get people like the Pope with his encyclical, Our Common Home. We get the Dalai Lama, An Ethics for the Whole World, and religious or otherwise, must see that we need to work for the benefit of the entire earth and subordinate ourselves, all the way from our individual selves to our social identities, towards that higher good. And it's happening in many ways. I think that the more we can articulate it, and the more we can give it not just a religious foundation, but a very, very strong scientific foundation, then the more successful we will be.
What we have discussed so far is basically about the importance of religion as a tool for cooperation between individuals in a group. But I want to go to the core philosophical issue, and that is science and religion dealing with the same dimension at all, at its core? And I don't mean in its sufficiency, but I mean science deals with things that you can understand, but you will always end up with things that you don't understand. And is there a place for an existence where we will understand everything and we won't need that tool of faith and religion? And I just want to quote a little story because it's a very funny story. And I have told you this before. There are those Jews in Chelm. Chelm in the Jewish legendary, there is Chelm, which is a little town in the Russian Empire, which they hold themselves as great scientists, and they think they can understand everything. And whenever they hear something that they cannot understand, they hold conferences and scientific sessions. And they hear that there is something which is a wagon without horses. And it's actually not just one wagon, it's many wagons that are tied together. It's a train. But they have never heard of such a thing. And they come together, try to explain what it is, and they come up with different crazy ideas. You know, there are some small horses in the front, something. But then somebody gets up and he says, you know, I didn't solve the whole problem, but I solved 95% of the problem. What do I mean? This is 25 wagons that are tied together. The 25th one is pulled by the 24th one. The 24th one is pulled by the 23rd one. The 23rd one is pulled by the 22nd one, all the way up to the third one, which is pulled by the second one, and the second one, which is pulled by the first one. What pulls the first one, I still don't know, but you see, I solved 95% of the problem. And basically, we all understand that he didn't solve anything of the core of the problem. So isn't it, I always have the feeling when people want to replace religion with science that they are misunderstanding what the role of science and what the role of religion is. Science tries to explain us the process of our existence, or how our existence came about, like evolution. It doesn't try to explain what is the reason for our existence, or what is the starting point of the why of our existence. What do you think about this, David?
I wish I could communicate in jokes as well as you can.
Well, that's because I'm religious. I'm strict religious, and that comes together with that.
Their scientists need to work on their sense of humor.
True.
And
if they want to be sufficient.
Two important things need to be said. Science all by itself only tells us what is. It does not tell us what to do. And so that makes science incomplete. Science has to be supplemented with values. It's only science plus values that enables us to say anything about what we might do. Now, whether those values come from religion per se or some other worldview is an important point. And I would side with His Holiness the Dalai Lama when he says in his book, Beyond Religion, Towards an Ethics for the Whole World, because not everyone's going to share the same religion. We need to boil this down to some set of ethical principles that anyone can understand, no matter what their religion or if they're not religious at all. So yes, we need an ethics, and science does not provide that. Now, whether that ethics needs to be for the whole world, that ethics needs to be something which is cosmopolitan enough so that it is not narrowly are religious. So there's point one. Point two is humility, is that scientists need to be humble because there is so much that remains unexplored and also so much that we currently regard as fact, which turns out to be not so, because the apprehension of the real world, we're always peering through our respective cultures. And because our meaning systems are, and our whole ability to have meaning systems, all of our symbolic systems are built and designed primarily to cause us to survive and reproduce, not to directly apprehend factual reality. In order to see the world that exists apart from human existence. That's always a work in progress. And so a tremendous amount of humility is called for to be a scientist. And then there's those values. So that's my best answer to your question in a short space.
Well, definitely those are topics that we can, I think, continue the discussion, and I'm sure we will. Just on a last note, because we have something like 1.5 minutes left, that makes it 90 seconds. You know, while we were talking, I was thinking that basically the basis of science and religion comes from the same search. It comes from the search of for the truth, for a higher meaning. In your experience, what can a scientist do in order to acclimate this or to acquire this humility that you just said is so important? And in your experience, does a scientist that is religious or has faith or has the acceptance of something which is not comprehensive, does that help him in his scientific work?
I think the best thing a scientist can do is to leave the ivory tower and to try to actually change things in the real world. For those of us that study evolution, which includes cultural evolution, and leave the ivory tower and actually try to manage the process of cultural evolution in real world settings. That means getting together with everyone else who's trying to do that. And there, I guarantee you'll learn humility when you try to do that. Actually try to work towards positive change and to put your scientific skills to the wheel along with everyone else that's doing that from other perspectives. I guarantee that will, in the first place, teach scientists humility, and also that scientists will find that they have a very useful place at the table in that endeavor.
Well, David, I think we ended off with some practical note and a moral note, which is very close to my heart as a religious person. So I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure our audience did as well, and I hope we will be able to continue maybe in person next year. The scientists will solve our problem of the COVID. And I wish you good health till then, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks to Brain Bar for the opportunity.
Thank you, Brain Bar.